Most people watching Bob Mueller's testimony this week came away with the same impression, including media across the political spectrum. Mueller was stumbling and at times seemed confused, but now some are questioning whether that misses a larger point. A funny thing happened in the aftermath of Special Counsel Bob Mueller's testimony before the Judicial Committee this week. The summary judgments from opposite ideological media outlets were the same.
His demeanor was somewhat shaky, his answers sometimes halting.
Mueller seemed deeply confused, at times confused about why he was there.
On optics, this was a disaster.
One of the single biggest, most epic embarrassments.
Even the New York Times called it a labored performance. But other voices insist the media has been judging by the wrong standard.
The story today is about the messenger. I think that the story is about the long term is going to be about the message.
That's national security expert Juliette Kayyem trying to steer the conversation away from optics. Columbia Journalism Review's public editor agreed, writing, "For Chuck Todd, all the political world's a stage, and he's the star." And conservative Washington Post writer Jennifer Rubin piled on too, saying the media is obsessed with scoring contests rather than focusing on the damning facts at issue. Still, it's hard to get around this stone-cold fact.
When you are in that position, you have to have a command of the facts, and he did not.
Or so it would appear. Yeah, I mean, I don't know you, John. I didn't want to be judging him. That wasn't what I set out to do. I set out to listen to this testimony. It was very hard to hear him, and he couldn't hear a thing himself. Yeah. I'm not sure why he couldn't hear a thing. He should have said why he couldn't hear. And then when somebody starts putting on a performance like that, we've all been to bad shows, and it is a show in a way. It's live. It's on. I had to finally turn it off. I couldn't get his message through all the stumble-bumbling. It was very difficult. So for the media to say what was true, I'm going to defend them.
Look, the problem here, quote unquote, was that the Democrats who hoped this would be a pivotal moment, and sympathetic media voices raised expectations way too high. This was going to be the moment. Okay, people didn't read the book, but now they're going to see the movie, and that'll break through, and the public will rush out into the streets with flaming torches, demanding that Donald Trump be dragged out by his paws, you know. So that didn't happen, and Robert Mueller, indicated that all he was going to give you, at best, was what was in the report. He has his facts straight in the report, which I actually read on my vacation. Shows you what a dork I am. That is well worth reading. I urge every American to do so. But this was a case of mismanaged political expectations and hype, and it didn't live up to the hype. That's all.
You know, when Robert Mueller said, "I don't want to testify," maybe the Democrats should have paid attention to that. I caught bits and pieces of it, mainly in coverage after the fact. I didn't think he was that bad. He was better in the afternoon than he was in the morning. He obviously has a hearing problem. I'm sympathetic. But, he said he didn't want to testify. And
this is about the media and how they covered it. Well, you're making excuses for him. It's like the media started focusing on the fact that he was a stumblebum. Was that fair?
I think it was largely unfair, and I'll tell you what I thought was even more unfair was he didn't say anything new. I mean, he must have said 1,000 times, "I am not going to say anything new."
That wasn't a criticism.
Yes, it was. No, absolutely.
No.
It's
an observation.
I think it was a criticism by, depending on where you were in the journalistic framework. Some of the opinion people said it didn't say anything new. The journalists, to your point, did not take it that way. So I would say this. Even if you are sharply prepared, even if you can take the heat, and I'm going to bring Hillary Clinton as an example, and she sat there 7 hours. That's right. And they threw it at her, and she pitched it back. And they threw it at her, and she pitched it back. And still, it was about the optics. Come on. It was about the optics. So it's really, part of this is about, did he have command of the facts? But other parts of it is just, when you're in a volatile situation like that, somebody wants to look at something other than what the facts of the case are, and the optics become part of that. To John's point, we're in a different media space than we were in years past when people came to testify and you actually didn't know. You might have hyped that they were coming, but you didn't have a clue about will it be volatile, will somebody put on a show, because you didn't know what they're going to say. Right. Now, damn near we have the speech before, everybody's expecting, and it becomes something else. So part of it is how we cover this stuff, and I'm with Juliette Kayyem. There should have been a balance about what, in fact, was at issue, and it wasn't.
This was an embarrassment for the liberal media. This was an embarrassment for folks like CNN, which have, rallied against the president, and they've been rallying against, I guess his account of things. I was embarrassed for Robert Mueller. This was the man who was the former director of the FBI. He should have had more of command. He was stumbling. It was awkward. It was like watching, with all due respect, it was watching someone that was elderly, couldn't hear, he didn't understand the questions. This is what our country's been focused on for 2 years and what the Trump presidency has been mired in. And to me, honestly, let's all move on. Let's, put this in the rearview mirror and keep on driving, because it was an embarrassment for the Democrats. It was an embarrassment for the cable news media elite. And it was an embarrassment for this investigation, and we need to move on. And also, what angered me was that they didn't look into the Clinton connections. They didn't look into the dossier. It was ridiculous.
Kelli, you're talking political. We're talking here now.
No, and I know what we're talking about, but you can't talk about one without talking about the other.
Well, I think you can in terms of coverage. We're just talking about how the coverage is.
But the coverage also is very skewed. The coverage is completely skewed.
Well, we can have another discussion about whether or not the facts of the case are skewed. Right now we're talking about, was there too much heavyweight on the optics of the man as his presentation? You can be embarrassed for him.
I can't blame Chuck Todd for saying what we all saw.
Yeah,
he was right.
I know, nobody's taking that away. I'm just saying that there was other stuff to cover, and it didn't happen.
Didn't make it.
Yeah.